So we came up with this topic and this title 8 months ago, and I don't know about your experience, but my experience is life happens. Yes. And yesterday happened, so not. Sorry. I'm going off script, and I have a different kind of flow, again, based largely on our conversation last night, that I think is more connected to the topic. I want to thank Alan and the team from UNI in terms of putting this together and inviting me. I wish they had planned for better weather, but you know, whatever. And I really want to say that I am a little bit in awe of the people that I'm sharing the stage with. I know a lot of what your work is, and to be sharing the stage with you all is a little bit daunting, but I could get off here in a minute and just listen, so I'm going to go with that. I've been playing with something a little bit in the last few years on where courage and compassion resides. And based on some of that work, what I've learned is that compassion is actually different than empathy and sympathy. And what brain science tells us is that compassion, unlike empathy and sympathy, compassion is actually located in an action center in our brain. Compassion calls us to act. I can be passively empathetic. I've been a dog owner or a pet owner all my life, so I can be really empathetic with you when your dog dies. Sit with you, cry with you, hold you, do what I gotta do, but I don't have to change anything. Compassion calls me, by brain science, compassion calls me to do something about it. Now, what we've seen in the experience of the Me Too movement is men are really good at being empathetic, right? Well, really good, okay. Men are capable of being empathetic. And it doesn't necessarily change anything. 90% of the men who are aware of the Me Too movement have changed nothing in their lives. And y'all know as well as I do, if nothing changes, nothing changes. So I say that for us and for our purposes of the conversation of men's leadership and accountability, to shift the conversation from empathy induction to compassion induction. And how do we encourage compassion with each other? Now, one of the things that I liked about what Jackson said last night, one of the many things I liked about what you said last night, was that we are capable of multitasking. So I can be compassionate towards you at the same time I'm being compassionate to myself. And let me tell you, that compassion for myself is what's holding me on stage right now, because I'm kind of freaking out. I'm a community organizer, I'm a meeting facilitator, give me a group of you all on a flat space, where we can like nosh at it, and I'm good to go. Put me on a stage, and I want to curl up in a ball and melt. And part of that comes from I was raised to be a perfectionist. And so that drive to be a perfectionist is what, and knowing that I'm not going to be, right? I'm not going to be perfect in the next 15 minutes in front of y'all. That drive to be perfection is what calls me to curl up in a state on a ball. Compassion reminds me to myself, reminds me that practice doesn't make perfect. That's a friggin' lie. Practice makes progress. My goal is to make progress with y'all. And maybe if I'm really on it, maybe you can see the progress that I make in the next 10 minutes. Okay, I'm ready to go. Thank you for that moment. So one of the things that I think we've missed in the conversation about men's leadership and accountability is that sometimes, I'm going to own it, sometimes when I walk the talk, I trip. And sometimes when I trip, I land exactly on the people I'm trying to ally with. Sometimes I trip and I stumble, and most of the time that's when I'm off by myself and nobody sees it. When I trip, y'all know what I mean, right? When I trip is usually in public, usually when the folks I'm trying to ally with are watching and paying attention, and when the folks who want to see me fall. And we don't have a lot of models of men acting in leadership and accountability, of transparently falling and then getting back up. My experience, fueled by my privilege, is my experience when I fall down, because falling down in public is humiliating, right? And in my experience, it usually involves some mud and some snot and maybe a scraped elbow and some torn clothes. I'm usually very humiliated by the experience of falling down. Where's the model to where I walk out of that as a path towards acting out of humility as opposed to withdrawing from that into a closet of privilege and shame. Because let me tell you, my knee-jerk reaction is to withdraw. Okay, so let me give you a concrete example. Several years ago, and I'm from Louisville, Kentucky, and Kentucky, demographically, Metro Louisville, which consists of Louisville itself and the surrounding counties, including 2 in southern Indiana, Metro Louisville is 86% white. And I was doing some work with a local YMCA, actually in southern Indiana, that was all black and brown male youth. And it was a school referral program, so these young black men were referred to this program, meaning that they had a history of school disciplinary issues. Most of them had police records, bless you. They had this background. You know, the kind of youth that are typically called at-risk youth, I prefer to think of them as at-potential youth. And they were brought into this program. It was a leadership development program. And the project was for them to come up with a social change or a social justice action that they could take charge of. It's y'all's agenda. Y'all figure out what you want to do. And my job as one of the adult facilitators is to help you do what you want to do. So their idea was to, now these are 15, 16, 17-year-old men. Their idea was to do a donation drive for the local domestic violence shelter. And as they delivered on Mother's Day was their plan. And their intentionality was, okay, we're adolescents. What we learned in conversation with the domestic violence shelter is that the adolescent children of women who go to the domestic violence shelter typically are forgotten. They get lots of diapers, they get lots of bottles, they get Jack for adolescent children who are being served. And so who better to raise donations for adolescent children than adolescents? They owned it, right? Their idea was to take, and so I'm going to go to the end of the story and then circle back, and I'm probably going to cry when I share this because it's just profound. These, there you go. These dozen young African-American and Latino men raised a ton, literally a ton, of donations to deliver to the domestic violence shelter on Mother's Day. Now, the process is what I want to talk with you about, because the process is where I tripped. The process was they went to their white high school principals, there were 3 high schools, and asked permission to put up these donation bins. And to a principal, they said no. Now that was humiliating to these young men, as you can imagine. I want you to just sit with what that must have been like. This was their idea. This wasn't mine. This wasn't their facilitator's idea. This was their idea that they took to the school and asked, we just want to set up donation bins. I also want you to sit with my responsibility for setting those young men up to fail. I absolutely should have seen that coming. And I absolutely should have gone in on the front end and had those conversations with the principals to say, here's what's coming. Are you okay with this? If not, what do I need to talk with you so that you get okay with it? I didn't do that. My privilege blinded me. I tripped and I fell smack dab on these 15, 16, 17-year-old young men. My knee-jerk reaction was like, okay, sorry, gotta go. Let me hide from this. Compassion called me back to the table and said, nope. Okay, that was a setback. Before we move forward, I need y'all to tell me how angry you are. And I need y'all to tell me how angry you are at me. And I'm not moving until you're done. And at first they were like, yeah, right. You old white man, want me to tell you how angry I am at you. I'm not moving. I will sit here with my mouth shut and I will listen to what you've got to say. Bring it. And they did. For 4 weeks. They brought it. And did I get some anger directed at their principals? Did I get some anger directed at the judges? Did I get some anger directed at the police? Did I get some anger directed at the world? Sure I did. It was not my job at that moment to parse it out. My job at that moment, being accountable in leadership, was to sit down, shut up, and listen. Now, I don't want to use this to aggrandize myself. I want to use this around how do we develop models? When we're talking about men in leadership and accountability, how do we develop these 4 real models of what does it look like? Because we're going to fall. We're going to trip doing this shit. I didn't have any models. Coming up in South Texas in 1980 in this movement, I did not have any models of what it meant to be a man in leadership and be accountable. We don't have many more now. You know, we have a few of us, but most of y'all don't know me and what I'm doing, so I'm like, you know, whatever, right? So just in closing, let me say 3 things. Courage and compassion as a driving force for how we do this work. Practice makes progress, not perfect. And sometimes when we walk the talk, and sometimes being humiliated is a pathway to humility. And that's stronger work. Thank you very much. I hope we have a grand opportunity to conversation. Thank you.